So we're using what was given in discovery, and they're using some different copy. It does bring up some potential issues we might need to deal with on redactions later. It's not going back to the jury, but I know when the state gets public disclosure requests, we block that information out. It's part of the public disclosure RCW. So it's not something we need to deal with now, but because that additional WASC, NCI, DOL information's in there, it's pushing it down further and adding some information. Does that make sense?
Yes, and is there any issue with the substance of the data that was entered into the report?
No.
Okay.
If I understand the court's question correctly. And nothing's been testified to that the state has any concerns about.
Defense.
Yeah, that's a quick comment. Nothing to add.
The court this morning did receive defendant's offer of proof that it had requested last week, and so I got a chance to skim it. I'm going to read it very carefully. State, did you get a copy of that?
We got it late last night, so we're seeing it this morning. We'll read it over lunch.
All right, and
It's 5
certainly,
pages.
as the court indicated last week, the court will give a chance for the state to respond.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Doesn't seem to be something I need to rule on right now, but I appreciate the defense preparing this over the weekend and getting it to the court. It's very helpful, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anything from the state? Well, are the jurors all here?
Yeah, sure.
All right, the jurors are here. That's good to know. Anything from the state?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Defense?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. Can you bring the jury in, please?
Yeah, did it.
The jurors are entering the courtroom. Thank you. Everyone may be seated. Good morning, members of the jury. The state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Leah Heiberg.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, please.
Thank you.
State your name and spell your last name.
Leah Heiberg, Heiberg.
Ms. Arnold.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Heiberg, what is your occupation?
I'm a law enforcement dispatcher at South Sound 911.
And where is South Sound 911 located? In what county is it located?
Here in Pierce County.
Thank you. And how long have you been a law enforcement dispatcher?
Over 6 years.
Okay. And what kind of training have you received to work as a dispatcher?
It starts off as a phone training program, learning about report writing, taking 911 calls, non-emergency phone calls, writing reports, things like that, dealing with all sorts of people calling for various reasons. And then the next phase of that is going into actual dispatching units, talking to officers on the radio, things like that. It's about a 4 to 8 month training in different phases, starting kind of slower, working up to the busier and building your skills.
And what kinds of jobs did you have before you began working for South Sun 911 as a dispatcher?
Before that, I was a medical dispatcher for Rural Metro and AMR, which subcontracts with Tacoma Fire, and then I was also a EMT with Rural Metro for 8 years.
And what are your duties as a law enforcement dispatcher?
Every day coming into work, accounting for units, making sure everyone's logged into service, dispatching calls, reading calls, see what needs to be handled in certain priority levels, different call types, dispatching units, making callbacks, contacting fire. It goes on.
Okay. And what shifts have you worked throughout the day?
I have worked graveyard, which is 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and now I'm on day shift 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
12 hours?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and I forgot to ask, how many agencies does South Sound 911 dispatch for?
I believe 19 law enforcement agencies.
So let's talk now about an incident that occurred on January 27th, 2021. Do you know which one I'm referring to?
Yes.
And were you working at approximately 2:05 a.m.?
Yes.
And what shift were you working?
Graveyard.
Okay.
Till 6 a.m.
And which agency were you dispatching for that night?
Tacoma Police.
And do you know Conrad Shadle?
I do.
Who is he?
He's my coworker. He's a dispatcher.
And was he also working the overnight graveyard shift on January 27th, 2021?
He was.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to step down, if I may, Your Honor. We've put up a diagram that Mr. Shadle drew for us last week showing the South Sound 911 floor plan, primarily of the dispatchers. And could you point out for us or mark where you were sitting? I don't know if there's some markers there.
Is this Exhibit 7?
This is exhibit. Sorry. Yes, it is, Your Honor.
I was here.
Can you put your initials? Okay. Great, thank you. And can you point out for the jury where Mr. Shadle was sitting?
Here.
Okay. And let the audio record reflect that Ms. Heiberg is pointed to 2 seats away. You were sitting 2 seats away from Mr. Shadle.
The wall right there, too.
And how high is that wall?
We can see over it standing, but not sitting.
Okay. All right, thank you. You can return now to your seat. And I'm sorry, did you say you were sitting or standing?
Sitting.
Sitting, okay. And during this early morning shift, did you dispatch an officer needs help call to Tacoma police officers?
Yes.
And how did that come about?
The call lands on my screen as a Tacoma North dispatcher. For that jurisdiction, I'm responsible for those units that respond to that area. Those are Tacoma police officers. Call lands on the screen. It is a bright red color that notates the most important level of call. There's different colors for different priorities, different response types. So the call alerted red. I opened it up. You read the address, see who's the reporting party, see what they're reporting, make sure everything lines up, and then you have to dispatch it.
And what was the information you received initially regarding the nature of this call?
All I had was that someone was threatening to kill Troyer.
Okay. And you're referring to Sheriff Troyer?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know from whom you received that information? Among your coworkers?
Conrad.
Okay. And what did you do when you received that information, that pop-up?
Initially, I was shocked. It's not very common that calls like this happen. They do happen. It's just not very common. And from working with Troyer for the past 6 years, I was scared for him.
Okay. So, what did you do with respect to the call itself?
In that kind of call, instantly what happens is there's an alert tone. It's a long beep that you hear, and that kind of alerts all responding officers. Listen up, we're about to give you some really important information. Someone's life is in danger. We need everybody to go. So I hit the alert tone, it's a long beep, and then I dispatched out for all available units to respond to the address, and then I said for threats to kill.
And we've had testimony from at least one officer, a couple of officers about it. They've referred to it as a tone out. So you were the one who actually activated the tone?
Yes.
Okay. And who did the alert go out to?
On my channel, everyone who was listening to Tacoma North Primary Radio.
Okay. And did you know who Sheriff Troyer was at the time?
Yes.
Okay. And in your 6 years as a dispatcher, how many times have you activated this kind of call?
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I believe around 3.
Okay. And when handling an officer needs help call, what is your paramount duty as a dispatcher?
First and foremost, that the officer that needs help is getting help and is safe. That's all that matters. My duties, however, as a dispatcher is to get those units, get them the most up-to-date information, update them while they're en route, and then document everything as well.
And do you recall the location where this threat was reported from?
I don't understand.
Do you know which location you were sending units to?
I believe the call went in as a home address, and then it was updated that he was at 27th and Deidre or cross streets.
Okay. And were you able to locate that specific address on a map?
Yes.
And what did you see when you pulled it up?
It's a cul-de-sac, so it's a big housing development. We have multi-different maps that we can look at. I use 2 maps side by side. One is property lines and boundaries. One is also Google Maps. So I can see different residences, their structures, their grass, your garages, things like that. And I could see that 27th and Deidre was in fact a cul-de-sac that came, a shorter cul-de-sac, not a long one.
Okay. And were you aware that Mr. Shadle was talking with Sheriff Troyer while you were dispatching units?
Yes,
And how were you aware of this?
because he was adding information to my call. So as Conrad's talking to Sheriff Troyer, it's going in the call, which I am then viewing.
Okay. So based on the information and the updates from Mr. Shadle, what did you think was happening through the course of this call?
During the course of the call, I had imagined,
Objection.
Sustained. Sustained.
So we've heard testimony that at least 40 units initially responded to Sheriff Troyer's call. What is a unit?
Objection mischaracterizes. Counsel's testifying.
Sustained.
Have you closely reviewed the CAD to count the number of units who initially responded to this call?
yes,
And how many units did you count?
I believe 43.
And what is a unit?
A unit is a patrol vehicle that was assigned to the call.
Okay. And did any of these units have more than one person in them?
Yes, so by my count, there's 43 units assigned to the call, but potentially up to 46, if not more, officers, as 3 of the units were 2-man cars.
Okay. And with that number, 43 or 46, if you count the units with 2 people inside, did they all eventually arrive at the scene?
Objection, speculation, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Where were the units coming from?
Multiple different jurisdictions. There was University Place, Pierce County Sheriff's Department, Tacoma PD, Ruston, State Patrol, Tribal, Fife, Sumner, Puyallup, Bonnie Lake, Ording, Buckley.
And you testified that you were handling the Tacoma police officers, is that right?
Yes.
That was your duty for dispatch that
Yes.
night? So how was it that these other units were coming from different locations in the county?
Yes. So the other seatings that you see up there on the chart, there are 7 primary radios that split up those 19 law enforcement agencies on each radio. And then there's 3 other relief dispatchers. So for an officer needs help call, not only am I using that alert tone to alert the officers that are actually responding to the call, all of the other agencies are advising their units as well. So all those other dispatchers are doing the same thing that I am.
And among the 43 units that you counted who initially responded, were all of those units dispatched by dispatchers, or did some of them attach themselves to the call?
Some of them attach themselves and we dispatch them.
And
So
can you
both.
describe what that means when you attach yourself to a call as an officer?
A unit can do it on their own. If on their computer, they can attach themselves to a call. Usually the call number is given out over the air, so the officers can look it up and they can attach themselves to it.
And prior to today, did you count the number of dispatchers who worked on this call?
I believe 10.
10, okay. And after dispatching the officer needs help call, did the call get downgraded at some point after you toned it out?
Eventually, yes.
And how did that happen?
The unit had advised that they just needed one more unit to continue. They didn't need everybody to continue. And that was advising me that the call could be downgraded.
So what did you do in response to that notification?
As a dispatcher, all I do is just air that information. As information all units, only one is needed to continue. What the officers do is up to them.
Okay. And who has the authority to downgrade the call in that manner?
The officers on scene, not me.
Okay. And is downgrading the call different than canceling the beeper or that tone? That was
They are
on?
different, yes.
Can you explain?
So the beeper is different than the alert tone. The alert tone is the initial long tone that you hear at the beginning of a call to get everyone's attention. What the beeper is the beeper is a steady beep about every 10 seconds that is held for priority traffic on an event like this, so that everyone else knows that there's a important call happening and that they need to hold off on all other radio traffic unless it is something else priority. So the beeper was continued on until an officer cancels it. That way no one else is taking up airtime.
Okay. And after this incident, did you have a telephone conversation with Officer Lawless regarding the officer needs help call?
I did.
And what was the nature of the phone call?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled with respect to the form of the question. What was the nature of the call?
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, you can answer the question. What was the nature of the phone call with Officer Lawless?
He was just inquiring about what an officer,
Okay, excuse me.
Sorry.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Can you more generally describe what the nature of the call was without referring to specific statements?
going over the call from the previous night, what an officer needs help call is, who all responded, how many units responded.
Sustained.
Okay. Did you provide Officer Lawless with information about how South Zone 911 handles an officer needs help call?
Yes.
Bleeding.
Sustained.
Are you familiar with South Zone 911's policies and procedures for handling officer needs help calls?
Yes.
And did you follow those policies and procedures?
Objection, speculation, legal conclusion and conclusion. 401, 402, 403. And leading.
Sustained on leading.
I'm going to repeat my question. Are you familiar with South Zone 911's policies and procedures?
Yes.
Based on the information South Sound 911 received at approximately 2:05 a.m. on January 27th, would you handle this same information the same way today?
Sustained.
I forgot to ask a question. I skipped over a question earlier. While you were handling this call, you indicated that you were aware that Mr. Shadle was talking with Sheriff Troyer. Is that right?
Yes.
And did you become aware that Sheriff Troyer asked for 1 or 2 cars?
Yes.
How did you become aware of that?
From talking directly with Conrad.
And how did that occur? That was during the call?
Correct.
And what was your reaction to learning that Sheriff Troyer wanted only 1 or 2 cars?
That at the point of which he was wanting 1 or 2 cars was way further down the phone call, and we were way past that point.
Thank you. I pass the witness.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Ann Bremner, and I represent Sheriff Troyer. I have a few questions for you. Were you counseled or disciplined for how you handled this incident?
Yes.
Okay. And because your supervisors were critical of how you handled this incident, isn't that right?
Objection, misstating the facts.
Overruled. Overruled.
They were not fully satisfied with how you handled the situation, is that right?
No.
Let me ask you a different way. You have a supervisor, Jody Mayer, am I saying that right?
Correct.
Did she counsel you, this is a performance issue report that I have, for a number of things, including for gossiping about this case?
That's incorrect.
Does the word gossip appear in the document where you were counseled?
Correct.
Okay. And the gossip was referring to you talking to any officer about what happened after the fact of the dispatch, isn't that right?
One more time.
You were counseled for gossiping about this incident involving Sheriff Troyer after you were done with your dispatch duties on the 27th.
No, that's incorrect.
Well, let me just ask you directly. It says right here that,
Objection, Your Honor. Defense is reading from a document.
Well, let's let her ask the question first.
what I have, it says Leah's conversation with the
Objection, Your
officer.
Honor.
You need to stay.
Your Honor, this is from the AG's office.
Objection.
Defense has not stated what document she's referring to.
Incident report, cell sound
And it's a
911.
hearsay statement, Your Honor, from a document that is not in evidence.
Well, that's overruled.
I'm cross-examining Your Honor on how she handled the call and mistakes that she made that resulted in my client getting charged with a crime, 2 crimes.
You may ask your question.
Thank you. The response Leah gave to the officer were based off assumptions she made due to the content of the call as it was entered in CAD. Leah's conversation with the officer amounted to gossip. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And this was written up in a document, what I just read, was written up in a document and given to you, wasn't it?
Correct.
Okay. How long at that time, had Jody Mayer been your supervisor?
Since I've started, 6 years.
Okay. And it says here, a negative performance note, that's what it was called. This was a negative performance note, isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
Based upon your handling of Troyer's incident and call, correct? I can move this along. It's not based on any other incident or call, is it?
It's certainly not based on how I handled the call. I handled the call appropriately.
Okay. But she said that you engaged in gossip.
And that's
And
not how I
also-
handled the
It
call.
also said you shared information that you shouldn't have.
That's
right?
incorrect. Yes.
Leah realizes she should not have shared the information she did. Do you remember that?
Correct.
Okay. And recognizes the importance of trust the agencies and public have in us and how her comments may be viewed by others. It also says here that you violated the core
Objection, Your
values.
Honor. Defense is reading from a document. It's hearsay
They
evidence.
can call them.
Your Honor, I can cross-examine on her performance deficiencies and negative review based on the handling of the
If they wish to
call.
call Ms. Mayer as a witness, they may do so, but defense is reading information from, it's hearsay evidence.
I object to speaking objections, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
Thank you. I'll start again. It says, Leah engaged in a personal conversation, showed poor judgment, and stated, opinions and made assumptions that violated our core values of respect, integrity, and unity. Is that what was said in your negative review?
Correct.
Then you had another one called coaching based on this incident. And in that one, I just want to ask you if this was stated. We reviewed how her choice of words had caused the confusion and why the sergeant was trying to get her to clarify the situation. We talked about our core values of respect and service and the importance of displaying those traits at all times. Was that stated in your coaching review of this incident?
Correct.
And the word used was confusing. Is that right? That I just read to you.
Correct.
Okay. Let's go back to a couple of things. Only 1 or 2 units were requested by Sheriff Troyer, isn't that right? 1 or 2, not 40 or 43. Isn't that right?
I didn't take the phone call.
Did you ever hear the request was only for 1 or 2 units, not 43 or 46 or 40?
Eventually,
And did you ever put that out to the units through your job in dispatch,
I don't remember.
one way or the other? So you never came on and said, oh, he only needs 1 or 2 cars, did you?
I don't remember.
One way or the other?
I don't remember.
Isn't that something you would remember from this incident? 1 or 2 versus 46?
Don't remember.
You don't remember, okay. You indicated that, and I think the question to you was, there was a 911 call, but I want to be clear for the jury on this too. Sheriff Troyer never called 911, did he?
No.
Okay. He called an inside line, didn't he?
Correct.
So that's not for emergencies involving officers who need help, is it?
Officers use that line for that, yes.
Is it a line to be used for an emergency where an officer needs help physically?
They can call it for that,
Do
yes.
you know of any times that happened?
I'm not familiar.
Ever? You're not familiar with any, are you?
I am not.
Okay. And you've worked there 6 years, like you said. What is the inside line generally used for?
Anything that officers need help with.
Could it be really minor?
Correct.
Like how minor? Can you give examples?
They can call up asking for their case number. They can call up asking for a phone number. They can call up saying they have a flat tire.
Okay. But that's the line that Sheriff Troyer used in this case, isn't it?
Correct.
Officer needs help. Can you give the jury some examples of the breadth of that kind of a call, what you see when an officer needs help? Can it be relatively minor? Can it be serious?
I don't understand, sorry.
How many officer needs help calls have you handled in your 6 years?
I believe around 3.
Okay. And how many, can you tell the jury, is there a call when an officer is down?
Yes.
Okay. What's that called? What's the call when an officer is down?
The call that they're on.
Now, what is it called? What do you put out on dispatch if an officer is down, shot, beaten, etc.?
An officer needs help.
And you've only had 3 of those in 6 years?
No, that's incorrect.
Okay. How many have you had in 6 years?
If you're specifically talking about officer needs help type codes initially going into CAD,
Right.
I've had 3. If you're talking about line of duty deaths where officers been shot and killed, I've had many more.
How many?
6, probably?
Just so I'm clear, though, what you're telling the jury right now is officer needs help. Officer needs help. You've only had 3 of those in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
What about if an officer's injured? What is the call?
That's handled on the call that they're on. It's responded to like an officer needs help.
So you're just saying in the last 6 years you haven't had officers threatened more than 3 times, is that right?
No, I believe you're confusing the call type with what's actually responding.
Why don't you explain it?
The officer needs help call type is what is initially put into the computer.
Right. Do you need a minute? Why are you upset? We can take a brief recess. I mean, I don't really need to, but,
When an officer is killed
right.
or a deputy is killed, it's on the call type that they're on. So most likely, they're on a home invasion and they get shot by the suspect.
Okay.
We don't put in an officer needs help call. We treat it the same.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's plenty of times when officers here in the county are assaulted, need assistance, are threatened, etc.
Correct.
I'm trying to get to what call that would be besides officer needs help, that type of call.
Any call type they're on, traffic stops, domestics, shootings, stabbings, any call type they're on, it can happen.
How is it put out by you?
It is toned out and alerted that a unit needs help.
And that has only happened 3 times in 6 years.
No, that happens almost daily.
That's my question. Thank you. Now, my notes show that, and you testified that the 2 first officers on the scene said they only needed 1 more unit. Is that right?
Can you say it again?
Yeah. The first 2 officers at the scene only needed 1 more unit. That's what they indicated to you. Is that right? Or that's what they indicated?
If that's what the recording says.
Okay. And just so we're clear, 40 or 43 or even 46 officers did not arrive at that scene, did they?
Correct.
It looks like the officers that first arrived at the scene, or any officers, didn't complete a report that night or write a report. Is that right?
Correct.
And the call was closed out, correct?
Correct.
What does that mean when the call is closed out?
That the call's been handled, it's completed.
Isn't it true that the call was reopened the next day, if you know?
I believe so.
And who opened it, if you know?
I don't know.
And why would a call be opened the next day when the case was closed out the night before?
Don't know.
If I could just have a moment, Your Honor.
Granted.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, and thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect, Ms. Serrano.
Ms. Heiberg, I see them getting emotional. Is it because you have dealt with officers who have been killed
Yes.
and deputies?
Objection, Lee.
Sustained.
What is the difference between an officer needs help call and an officer at the scene of an incident who's been shot, stabbed, injured in some way?
Objection, Gray.
Overruled.
There are 2 different call types. There's already units with an officer needs help call. It's generally a call like this instance, other instance that I've had where someone is called up. I had one where they said that they were with Border Patrol. They called up and their partner had just been shot outside 7-Eleven. That's not one of our agencies. I don't dispatch for Border Patrol, but they're still a law enforcement officer and I still need to get them help. That is toned out, all cars, everyone's responding. When you talk about officers who have been killed in the line of duty, those are usually on traffic stops, home invasions, driving to the scene. Their backup and their coworkers already know that they're going into a potentially dangerous situation, and they know generally a game plan of what's happening. We have call details, we have suspect information, we have where they're positioned, are there any weapons, are there any drugs, is anyone high, is anyone intoxicated? An officer needs help call, we have nothing except for that he needs help. And while they are responded to the same, they're different in information. One has a wealth of information for the most part, and one just has nothing.
Thank you. I want to go back to the phone call that you had with Officer Wallace. What information did you provide to him?
Objection hearsay. Yeah, let's go. Thank you.
Overruled.
What information did you provide to Officer Lawless regarding the response to his call on January 27th, 2021?
That is just the utmost highest priority call that we respond to.
And did you follow South Sound 911's policies for handling an officer needs help call?
Objection asked and answered, calls for legal and other conclusion lack of foundation. And also the discipline. But that's, I have a number of objections I stated, Your Honor. Thank you.
Sustained.
That's all, thank you.
Recross.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Thanks.
May we excuse Ms. Heiberg as a witness?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
You are excused from this case.
Thank you.
Leah.
State's next witness.
Your Honor, Darren Steiner.
Members of the jury, if you need to stand or like to stand for a second, that would be fine too.
No, I need to get the map.
Maybe start doing it now. You want to start doing it now?
Yeah.
Your Honor, there's a
We need to make a change. up here.
exhibit to go up.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat, please. State your name and spell your last name.
Darren Steiner, Steiner.
Thank you.
To the state.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Steiner.
Good morning.
What do you do for a living?
I own a distribution company that contracts with the newspapers to provide home delivery services.
And what does that mean exactly, home delivery services?
It means we deliver the newspapers to individual residences of subscribers, to stores that sell copies in the stores.
Okay.
That's
And how long
basically
have you
it.
been doing this?
Since 2009.
And do you own the company that provides this service now?
Yes.
And what's the name of it?
Steiner Distribution.
And how long have you had that company?
I've had that company since 2017 and a different company from 2009 till then.
And prior to that, were you working for a different company providing the same service?
Prior to that, I worked as an employee of the News Tribune and did basically the same thing, but as an employee instead of independently.
Okay. And what newspapers does your company deliver?
We deliver the News Tribune, Seattle Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and then a couple other local ones like the Peninsula Gateway out in Gig Harbor.
And how many newspapers do you deliver each day?
Just in Tacoma or everywhere that we cover?
I'd say everywhere and also in Tacoma.
Okay, in Tacoma, about 8,000 daily, altogether about 15.
And do you work with newspaper carriers to provide this service?
Yes.
And how many newspaper carriers deliver newspapers for you in the city of Tacoma?
Roughly 40.
And are these newspaper carriers your employees?
No, they are not. They are independent contractors.
And what does that mean, independent contractor?
It means that I pay them a fee to deliver a particular route. They're responsible for their taxes, their vehicle, their whatever they need to use to make the deliveries. And they fall under the guidelines as an independent contractor, meaning that I cannot, I can guide them, but I can't tell them what to do. And that's the basic definition.
Okay. And do you know Cedric Altimer?
Yes.
How do you know him?
He's been a contractor for me.
And how long has he worked for you?
Started in January 2016,
And what part of Tacoma does Mr. Altimer work in?
North Tacoma.
And does Mr. Altimer's route include Vista View Drive and nearby streets in North Tacoma?
Yes, it does.
And how long has he been delivering newspapers in that particular area?
July 2019.
And do other members of Mr. Altimer's family also work for you as independent contractors?
Relevance?
I'll move on.
Sustained.
And we have a map here, I believe it's number 4? Already forgotten. Google map. I was going to ask you to
Okay.
step down. This is State's Exhibit number 4. And for the audio record, the southmost part of this map is North 23rd, and the northmost part of this map shows Narrows Place. Mr. Steiner, can you point for the jury to any of the streets that Mr. Altimer delivers newspapers on?
Pretty much everything along Narrows Drive and this entire neighborhood would be his to deliver.
And if you wouldn't mind just stating you were,
Narrows Drive, Narrows Place, North 27th, Deidre Circle, Bridgeview, Fremont, Vista View, Harmon, 25th, 27th, Bridgeland, Narrows Lane, and Narrows Place.
okay, thank you. Go back to your seat now. Thank you. And are you familiar with the incident that occurred involving Mr. Altimer and Sheriff Troyer on January 27th, 2021?
Yes, I am.
And in the nearly 7 years that Mr. Altimer has been working for you, have you received any complaints about him?
I've received normal complaints about missed deliveries, wet papers, papers not showing up, that sort of thing's pretty common. I have not received any personal complaints about him or about property damage or anything like that.
Okay. And have there been any specific complaints about Mr. Altimer being on property where he's not supposed to be?
No.
What are the duties and responsibilities of a newspaper carrier?
From start to finish, they would show up at our warehouse, get their papers, assemble them, take them in their vehicles out to their routes, make the deliveries, whether it's walking up and putting it on a porch, whether it's tossing it in a driveway or putting it in a blue tube at a mailbox, and then making sure the right product gets to the right house.
And what time of day do newspaper carriers work?
Generally between midnight and 6 a.m.
And what time do the newspapers arrive for them to begin putting them together?
Anytime after 10:30.
And do they have a set schedule?
No, that's part of being an independent contractor is we ask that they're done by 6 a.m. They judge their time and they can start whenever they need to start to finish by 6 a.m.
And who determines which neighborhoods a newspaper carrier will deliver to?
I guess I do. It just depends on which neighborhoods need a carrier, which ones I have a carrier on. They can give up their routes at any point in time with a notice, and then we churn through people that way.
And how does a newspaper carrier know where to go? Like, how do they learn their route?
I provide them a list of addresses. I also have developed, or have previous carriers who have developed, like a delivery sequence list that would take them from the warehouse through the route. And then we update that with current customer lists and use that so they know where to go.
And does your company provide the vehicles that newspaper carriers use to deliver?
No,
Do you pay for the mileage or gas?
no,
And how is a newspaper carrier paid?
per delivery. Well, I have two models. One is a per delivery, and one, if I have a difficulty keeping somebody in the neighborhood, I would agree to a flat fee, say $400 a month, $800 a month, just depending on the number of deliveries and how long it takes.
And if you could just describe what a typical work shift looks like for a newspaper carrier.
Probably an hour or so to assemble their papers. 15-minute drive out to the route, and then they make the deliveries for, most routes on average are 2 to 3 hours long. And then they go home.
And on average, how many newspapers does a newspaper carrier deliver in one night?
150 to 200.
And does that mean 200 households?
200 individual papers.
Okay.
It could be somebody subscribes to the News Tribune and the Seattle Times at the same residence.
Okay. And have you personally worked as a newspaper carrier?
I have.
And do newspaper carriers sometimes draw attention from local residents and even police officers?
Pretty frequently.
And how has that occurred for you? Or have you actually been stopped?
I've been stopped many times. Most times people just want to know what you're doing because what we do looks strange. Stopping your car, running up to houses, going back to your car, moving down the street, pulling up to mailboxes. It just looks odd. Most people just ask what you're doing. You say, I'm delivering the newspapers, and that's all. We just move on.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Hello, Mr. Steiner.
Hello?
Mr. Altheimer is an independent contractor, right?
Correct.
And that means that you don't control how he does his job. Right?
Correct.
But you do sometimes provide guidance, right?
Yes.
And you have provided guidance before that when people are driving in and out of driveways, they shouldn't turn their lights all the way off.
Generally, no. I would leave my lights on.
And you've provided that guidance, they should leave their lights on so that people aren't suspicious of them.
I guess you could say that, sure.
And you don't have any written policies or rules, right?
No.
It's a liability issue, right?
Correct.
So you've never told Mr. Altheimer one way or another how to drive his route or different paths he should take or anything like that?
No, when he first started, he was probably given a list of what we feel was the most efficient way, but he has the right to deliver it however he wants.
And you didn't, there's no training except for I think there's a ride-along for
Correct.
new drivers? Right.
Yeah.
And is it true that newspapers are generally to be left in the front area of a person's house unless there's an agreement with the customer to deliver it elsewhere?
Generally, our standard of delivery is a porch delivery if it is requested. Otherwise, we'll toss it to a garage door or a driveway or some other location that's been determined over many, many years.
But you wouldn't, a driver shouldn't deliver to someone's back door without customer permission, right?
I would agree with that.
The state asked you about Mr. Altheimer's complaint history.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it true that Mr. Altheimer has nearly 4,000 complaints in the years 2021 through November 2022?
It's possible. I haven't counted them, but it is possible.
Did you provide our office with his complaint history
I did.
in that time period? Okay. handing you some documents. Can you please take a look at them?
Sure.
Exhibit number?
Is this Exhibit B? Yeah. Had a chance to look at them, will you? Have you
How in-depth do you want me to look at them?
just so you know what they are.
I know what they are. I know what they refer to.
What are those documents?
These would be a list of all calls from his routes from customers, whether it's a missed delivery or wet paper, or he failed to deliver a replacement copy, or not delivered in the location that was wanted, or a critical complaint, which would be somebody who's complained 3 times within a 7-day period.
Okay. And Mr. Altheimer has a number of critical complaints in there, correct?
He does.
And that, again, that's a customer complaining that, making a complaint 3 times in 1 week?
For a critical complaint, yes.
And you said it's possible that those complaints are nearly 4,000 complaints.
It is possible, yes.
But you still employ Mr. Altheimer.
Correct,
In fact, he's still employed right now.
correct.
And he's worked for you uninterrupted since this incident.
Since this incident, yes, he has.
And Mr. Troyer doesn't take the paper, does he?
I do not know.
Oh,
We have so many subscribers, I don't know every individual one.
So, but you don't know one way or the other whether Mr. Troyer's ever received the paper?
I do not.
I have no further questions.
Redirect?
No questions, Your Honor.
You are excused.
Okay.
The state's next witness.
Your Honor, could we take a short break? We need to get some audio and video equipment prepared for the next witness.
Events, any objection?
Objection.
All right, members of the jury, at this time, you go back in the jury room. No talking about the case, no research. Long, or is that technologically not a wise thing to try?
Well, we need to make sure our witness is here. We're running a little faster.
And we need to play it and make
Yeah,
sure.
make sure it works.
Right, the court's at recess.
I know that
Thank
didn't
you.
answer the question, and we apologize.
You may be seated, thank you.
Can we deal with that while I start to read this?
Thank you. Please be seated. Is the state ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
And defense?
We are, yeah.
All right, thank you. Can you please bring the jury in? Given the delay, I'll consider that the court's morning recess, so I anticipate going until noon.
Thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. I actually spun out a little bit, just on ice.
The jury is entering the courtroom. Thank you. Everyone may be seated. The state's next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Zachary Hobbs.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, please. State your name and spell your last name.
My name is Zach Hobbs, last name Hobbs.
Ms. Serrano.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Officer Hobbs, it's the obvious question. What is your occupation?
I'm a police officer for the city of Tacoma.
And how long have you worked with Tacoma Police Department?
About 3.5 years now.
And do you have any prior law enforcement experience?
I worked at Pierce Transit as a public safety officer. We were special commission. So, yeah.
And what is your educational background?
I went to high school, got my high school diploma, and then I went to college, got my 4-year certificate in justice studies, law enforcement.
Okay. I want to talk to you about a call Sheriff Ed Troyer made to a 911 dispatcher in January 2021. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
Were you working in the early morning hours of January 27th, 2021?
yes.
And what shift were you working starting on January 26th?
That would have been grave shift, starting at 8 p.m.,
And what time did that shift end?
6 a.m.
And were you working alone or did you have a partner?
I had a partner,
And who was your partner?
Officer Darren.
And had you and Officer Barron worked together before?
Yes, we have.
And where were you at approximately 2:05 a.m. on January 27th, 2021?
I was working in the north end of Tacoma in the 2 sector.
Okay. And did you become aware of an officer needs help call?
Yes.
How did that come to you?
We were on another call at 6th and Orchard when the beeper went off. Dispatch called out, I believe it was a code 0 or priority 0, meaning officer needs help immediately.
And had you ever heard that tone out before for a priority 0 call?
No, I have not.
What did you do after hearing that call?
We immediately jumped in the car and headed towards the location that dispatch gave us, with my partner giving me directions how to get there.
Who was driving?
I was driving.
And did you receive any updates while you were driving to the scene?
Yes, we did.
And what was your understanding of what was happening at the time that the call came in?
It came out as Sheriff 1 requesting help. Somebody was threatening to kill him or threatening his life.
And were you aware that it was Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer requesting help?
No,
And when did you learn that it was Sheriff Troyer who had actually made the call?
not till after I arrived and I saw him when I began speaking with him.
Okay. And were you equipped with a body camera when you responded to this call?
Yes, I was.
Did you turn it on while you were en route to 27th and Deidre?
No, I did not.
And why not?
Because we'd only had the cameras for a couple weeks at this point. We were still trying to get used to them. It wasn't muscle memory at that point to click on a camera. Again, I'd never heard this code 0 come out, so that's all I was thinking about was getting to the scene and giving them assistance.
Okay. So what did you see when you arrived at the scene?
I saw two vehicles kind of parked in front of each other with a large SUV directly in front of me, and then a smaller sedan facing towards me. I saw two officers on either side of the sedan with their guns drawn in the low ready position,
Okay.
and I saw a gentleman in the driver's seat of the sedan.
Okay. And would you mind stepping down and drawing a diagram for us? Mainly to show us which direction you were walking into the scene from.
Exhibit number?
That'll be number 11.
11. Hold on one second.
Directly behind the SUV
Okay.
this way, and the sedan was in front of it, facing the opposite direction.
Okay, can you put your initials, maybe for you and Officer Barron down there, lower left corner, and mark the SUV and the sedan? So Officer, where was the SUV and the sedan in reference to the street itself? Were they near a curb or in the middle of the street?
From what I remember, they were pretty much in the middle of the street.
Okay. So can you go ahead and describe what happened next after you arrived and you obviously parked?
So after we parked and got out of our vehicles, I saw two officers on both sides of the sedan. I don't remember which one was on which side. It was Officer Lawless and Ventura.
Okay.
They were on either side of the sedan. Mr. Altimer was in the driver's seat right here, so they were speaking with him. I got out of my vehicle and walked over here where they were still talking to him. I don't remember if one of the officers on scene asked me to talk to Mr. Troyer, or I just went over there because nobody had talked to him yet.
Okay, hold on one second. Can you go ahead and draw just a line showing, generally as you can recall, your path, the path that you walked towards the sedan?
Yes.
Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, you can go ahead and get back on the stand. So before we talk about where you were, before you arrived to the sedan itself, as you were walking in the direction towards the sedan, did you see the driver of the SUV?
I saw them in my peripheral vision, but I didn't look at them. I didn't know who it was.
Okay. Do you recall whether this person was inside the SUV or outside the SUV?
I believe they were standing just outside the driver's side door.
Okay. Did you draw your gun as you approached the sedan?
I don't remember.
You testified earlier that you did speak with Sheriff Troyer, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you describe, first I want to ask, why did you feel compelled to go speak with Sheriff Troyer?
Objection, speculation, lack of foundation, the preamble, why did you feel compelled?
Sustained.
Why did you speak with Sheriff Troyer?
Because he was the caller, the reporting party, and somebody needed to go talk to him and figure out exactly what we were doing there.
Okay. Did anyone direct you to go speak with Sheriff Troyer, or did you just make that decision on your own?
Again, I don't remember if Officer Lawless asked me to, or if I just saw that nobody had talked to him yet, and I went and walked over there and spoke with him.
Okay. And was your body camera turned on when you spoke with Sheriff Troyer there?
No, it was not.
And why wasn't it on at that point?
Again, I didn't even think about it.
Okay. Do you recall where Sheriff Troyer was standing when you walked up to him?
I believe he was still just right outside the driver's side of his vehicle.
Okay. And who initiated the conversation?
It would have been me. It would have went something like, just kind of tell me what's going on, a real basic overview of why we're here.
Okay. What did Sheriff Troyer tell you?
He told me that he was inside of his home when he looked out the window and saw a gentleman standing outside with what he believed was a flashlight and a garage door opener. He believed that he was outside prowling houses at his neighbor's house. So Mr. Troyer went outside of his home, got into his vehicle, where he followed the gentleman in his car. At some point, the gentleman stopped his vehicle and got out of his car, where he confronted Mr. Troyer. He began yelling and cussing at him.
Okay.
And at some point, Mr. Troyer said that he knew he was a police officer. I don't know if he knew that he was a sheriff, but he knew that he'd seen him on TV and that he was in law enforcement.
So I'm going to stop you for a minute. When you say that he knew who he was.
Mr. Altimer knew that Mr. Troyer was in law enforcement.
Okay. Now, I want to back up just a little bit. So at the point that you walked up to speak with Sheriff Troyer, did you have any information about the driver in the sedan?
No,
Okay. Did you know his name at that point?
no,
Did you know that he was a newspaper carrier at that point?
no,
So everything that you've testified to with respect to Sheriff Troyer's account is based on the information that Sheriff Troyer gave to you?
correct.
Okay. Did Sheriff Troyer indicate whether the other driver being Mr. Altimer, make any threats towards him?
No, he didn't.
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Was there anything else that Sheriff Troyer said to you?
Objection vague unless she's referring to this initial contact, Your Honor. Should I talk about the whole incident or just something?
Yeah, sustained.
During the conversation, did Sheriff Troyer provide you with any other information regarding what had occurred?
No,
Did you ask Sheriff Troyer about the information that you had received from dispatch, specifically about a threat to his life?
no, I did not.
Did you ask Sheriff Troyer whether he believed the driver was going to kill him?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Did you ask any questions regarding a threat or a weapon?
Objection asked and answered and leading.
Sustained concerning leading.
Did you ask Sheriff Troyer specifically about any weapons?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What was Sheriff Troyer's demeanor?
He seemed a little bit annoyed with the situation.
What,
Meaning,
what do you mean by that?
I guess, more or less, he seemed like he didn't want to be there at that time. It just seemed like it was overwhelming how many people were there, or, like, yeah. I don't have any specifics. I just remember him seeming like he was annoyed by the situation.
Okay. Did you ask Sheriff Troyer any other questions about what had occurred?
Objection vague as to time, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did Sheriff Troyer express any fear of the other driver?
No,
Is there anything else that you recall about that conversation?
no,
Do you recall Sheriff Troyer making any statements about a threat or a weapon?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Approximately how long was your conversation with Sheriff Troyer?
maybe a minute long.
And how did the conversation end?
I don't remember.
Okay. What happened next?
Either I walked towards Officer Lawless to inform him of what I had heard, or I saw him walking towards us. At some point, we met up between where I was speaking with Mr. Troyer and where Mr. Altimer was in the vehicle. So we met in the middle just to discuss what he had told me.
And you related information to him?
Correct. Exactly what I told you. I just let Officer Lawless know this information.
And what did you do next?
After that, Officer Lawless went and spoke with Mr. Troyer, and I walked away over near my partner, Officer Barron, just kind of away from the scene, just acting as scene security.
Okay. When did you become aware that your body camera was not turned on?
When I walked over near my partner, Officer Barron, when your camera is on, it's a different color. It's red. And when I looked down at him, I saw his was red, and I realized mine wasn't on yet, so I tapped it on.
Okay. So that was the moment that you turned it on?
Correct.
After you walked over. And do you recall having a conversation with Officer Barron after speaking with Sheriff Troyer?
Yes.
And do you have an independent recollection of that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall whether you shared any of Sheriff Troyer's statements with Officer Barron?
Yes.
Okay, officer, I'm going to show you just a screenshot, if we can go to the video. And this has been marked. This has been marked. I need to get it marked.
Yep.
Can we preliminarily mark it without? Yeah, sorry.
This will be exhibit number 12.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, what is this exhibit?
It's actually State's Exhibit 12. This is Officer Hobbs's body camera.
Your Honor, we have a couple of enhanced copies, one for the defense and one for the state, so I'd just like to inquire which one
This is the enhanced version
from us. Or
from defense.
Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you.
That's Exhibit 12 that we're talking about?
I believe so.
Yes.
Is that Exhibit 12?
Yes.
Thank you. When you pull it out and put it back in.
I don't, it's ready. I just want to go to the image and not play it. Officer Hobbs, do you see the image on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recognize this image?
Yep.
What is this?
This is,
Oh, I am so sorry.
this is a still picture from my body camera of officers standing around at the scene.
Okay. And what timestamp do you see in the upper right-hand corner of this image?
2:18 in the morning.
And does this appear to be a fair and accurate representation, or still of your body camera video from this incident?
Yes.
And I will represent to you that this body camera video and audio has been enhanced by an expert hired by the defense team. The state moves to admit Officer Hobbs' body camera video from 000 to 1 minute 20.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection? Or
Correct.
is that the time range? Is that the
Yes.
entire length of time that's on Exhibit 12?
It's not the entire time, but it's the time that we would like to admit and
That-
publish.
Could you give that time again?
Sure, 00 to 01:20.
Is it a still or the video?
The entire, the video.
So when does it start?
It starts 0001.
So on the screen right now, it's timestamped 02/1850.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the time on the video.
So
2:18:50, and I don't know what the timestamp is going to be at the end. I'm looking, Your Honor, at the time on the video at the bottom when you hit play.
any comment from defense?
No, Your Honor, I just want to make sure we're not admitting the whole
No.
body video, because we've agreed on the part that's relevant to the case for the jury's consideration.
Correct.
So that's what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Do we have a full version that can be marked as an exhibit, and then this version that would be marked as a separate exhibit that would not have the additional information on it?
We can do that.
Agreed, Your Honor.
So, so exhibit 12 is the full version that some of it won't be shown.
Correct.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. Can we go ahead and play that?
Court's going to, go ahead.
As the sheriff said, pulling in the driveways, using a flashlight to look at addresses, probably because he's still looking at the address. That's pretty much it. I don't know how it started, how the sheriff got into his car, and then basically the guy pushed in his car, and then he started backing him down his car, and that was there was no gun. At one point he said he was going to kill me, and then when we asked him again, he didn't say that. Sure. How'd you get in the car? He said, this thing couldn't have Why did you get in the car?
I've seen this exact thing going on. I go look at prior contacts. Oh, paper delivery guy.
Yeah. Remember we had that one guy we were chasing? Yeah. By the sun, and then they had paper delivery.
And Your Honor, the times at the end, timestamp is 2:20:09.
Is that the defense understanding as to what was intended to be shown as well, stopping at 2:20:09?
Okay, have a moment, Your Honor.
Please,
That's correct, Your Honor.
thank you.
Thank you. Officer Hobbs, you testified earlier that Sheriff Troyer expressed no fear of Mr. Altheimer, correct?
Correct.
But isn't it true, according to this video, that you told Officer Barron, yeah, there was no gun, no threat. At one point, he said he's going to kill me.
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Isn't it true that Sheriff Troyer said to you he's going to kill me?
Correct.
Isn't it also true that when asked again, Sheriff Troyer denied making that statement?
Or deny, Your Honor. Leading.
Sustained on leading.
Do you recall Sheriff Troyer's response, or do you recall that part of the conversation with Sheriff Troyer?
No.
Based on your independent recollection of your conversation with Sheriff Troyer and the information you shared with your partner, as recorded by your body camera, did you have any evidence indicating that Sheriff Troyer's life had been threatened?
Objection, leading.
Sustained. Sustained on leading.
How long were you at the scene before making yourself available for another call?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
How long were you at the scene before making yourself available for another call?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you have an independent recollection of leaving the scene that night?
I do.
And would it help to refresh your memory if you reviewed the CAD report?
Yes, it would.
I object, Your Honor. You said he had an independent recollection. He doesn't need his memory refreshed, as I heard it.
Sustained.
I'm asking about the time that he left, how long he was at the scene.
I only object, I objected unless his memory needs to be refreshed.
Correct. Sustained.
Does your memory need to be refreshed?
If I need to know what time I left, then it does, yes.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness State's Exhibit Number 5.
I believe we went into service at 2:32 a.m.
Okay. And does the CAT show what time you arrived, or do you recall what time you arrived?
I do not recall, but I can check.
And I don't want you to read from the CAT, but if you find the information, if you could let me know by looking up.
Right. I do not see it says when we arrived.
That's okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's okay. I'll take that back. And Officer Hobbs, I do want to ask a couple more questions. There was no sound, looked like, for about the first 30 seconds of that video. Why is that?
Our cameras have a ready mode where they're, I guess, actively recording without sound in case you get into some kind of incident. So if you double click it, it'll capture the last 30 seconds video, but it won't have audio until you actually turn it on. So it's passively recording.
Okay. And finally, did you write a report in connection with this incident?
No,
Why not?
I was not asked to write a report. At the time, nobody was going to write a report on this incident. It wasn't until later on that Officer Lawless was asked to write a report.
Okay. Thank you. Pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, officer. I'm Ann Bremner, and I represent Sheriff Troyer. I'll make this quick. I hear you have a baby on the way.
Any minute,
Okay.
yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just have a few questions for you. You just testified that Sheriff Troyer told you that he'd been threatened by Mr. Altimer. Isn't that right? Said that in your presence.
On the video, that's what I said.
Okay.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's what this whole case is about. So, just so we're clear, on the video you said that you've been told by Sheriff Troyer that Altimer threatened him, correct?
In the video, correct, yes.
And I guess the best evidence, not the best ever, but great evidence is a video. That's why you wear body cams, right?
Correct.
And you wear body cams so you can make sure you preserve evidence, you adequately describe evidence, but you also can basically preserve what's been said at a scene by anybody involved, the potential victim, suspect, or witness. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Now, Officer Lawless was not wearing a body cam that night, early morning. Isn't that right?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't know one way or the other? Did you take any field notes yourself, just jotting down things?
No, I did not.
Okay. And do you know if Officer Lawless did take any field notes, just jotting down things?
I do not know.
You just testified that when when we walked away, it was something, you said something about we, that you had walked away. Who was we?
I'm not sure what point you're referring to.
Officer Lawless, at least in his deposition, talked about your being present when he talked to Sheriff Troyer. Do you know one way or the other whether he said that?
I don't.
Okay.
I haven't heard yet. I haven't heard anything about it.
Whether Officer Lawless is correct, and you were there for part of a conversation, any conversation with Sheriff Troyer, or not, did Sheriff Troyer ever, in your presence, deny being threatened by Alzheimer? Deny it?
No.
Okay. Did he ever backtrack any statement about being threatened that you heard?
No.
Do you know that he only asked for 1 or 2 cards? Does that sound about right? If you know.
I listened to the 911 call
Mhm.
last year after this incident happened, and that sounds familiar, but I don't have an exact number of cars that he asked for.
Okay. And it was pretty clear to you that when you got there, that Sheriff Troyer didn't know that Alzheimer was a paper carrier, isn't that right?
Correct.
At some point, he did learn that Alzheimer was a paper carrier, right? You know.
I would assume so, but I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay. And did his demeanor change in any way once he said or realized that Alzheimer wasn't suspicious necessarily, but was a newspaper carrier that would have business in the neighborhood?
I wasn't there when he found out, so I can't
Okay.
speak on that.
How long was it before you figured that out or found that out, that he was a paper carrier, from when he got there?
It was probably when I spoke with Officer Lawless after speaking with Mr. Troyer.
Okay. And Mr. Alzheimer was pretty agitated, in fact, very agitated when you got there.
Correct.
And we've seen video from the body cam of Officer Ventura showing that. Did you play any part in trying to de-escalate his behavior at the scene, or was that Officer Ventura or others?
That was Officer Ventura. I never spoke with him.
How many officers were at the scene when you got there?
When I got there, it was just Officer Ventura and Lawless.
Okay. So you were the third one.
Correct.
It sounds like, per the request from the initial officers, 3 would have been enough at the scene, not 40 or 43 or 46. Is that correct?
At the time, we only heard it was a code 0, somebody being threatened with their life. So at that point, no, not necessarily.
Have you ever had a situation when you thought someone was acting suspiciously, but then you later learned maybe what they were doing was absolutely lawful, based on facts that developed in a call or a visit to the scene?
Yeah.
And does that happen relatively often?
Yes.
And so first, when you see suspicious circumstances, you may seek out radio or others to help you, but maybe they don't become necessary when it turns out somebody is legitimately going about their business, I guess. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you remember Sheriff Troyer ever saying, let him just go do his job, or something to that effect?
No.
Was Mr. Alzheimer eventually released from the scene, from what you know?
Yes.
Wasn't charged with anything, right?
Correct.
And have you ever heard that phrase, no good deed goes unpunished?
I have.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Officer Hobbs, defense asked whether the statement that is over, well, first of all, let me ask you, what do you hear in that video that was played? What do you hear yourself saying to Officer Barron?
Question asked and answered, and it speaks for itself.
Overruled.
I can hear myself saying that he said he was threatened or threatened with something at first, and then he didn't say he was threatened the second time.
What else do you hear in that audio, in the video?
At the end of it, I can hear me talking about another incident with a paper delivery person that we had run into in the past.
Okay. Do you know one way or the other where you got that information, what you stated to your partner?
No, I don't.
No other questions?
Just a couple follow-up questions.
Be crossed.
you testified earlier, at one point, he said that Alzheimer threatened to kill him, but later we asked him, and he didn't say that. Who's we? Would that be Lawless?
That would probably be Officer Lawless. I never spoke with him again after that.
Okay, and Lawless was that you remember, right? Because that's a long time ago. You don't remember everything, do you?
Correct.
And again, Lawless had said you were with him when he spoke with Sheriff Troyer. That was in his deposition.
Okay.
I can't hear you. What? Is it fair to say you had a couple times you talked to Sheriff Troyer?
Is it fair to say that I spoke with him a couple times?
Yeah.
No, I only spoke with him when I got there the first time.
But if Lawless remembers differently, I've already asked you that. Did you testified, Sheriff Troyer said he was threatened, right? That's what you testified to here, correct?
In the video, that's what I'm heard saying, correct?
That's probably the best evidence, right, of what you were saying at the time.
Objection, Your Honor. Defense counsel is commenting on a statement.
Overruled.
That's what we hear, the best evidence of what you were saying back then and what you heard and indicating by what you're saying is the video and audio, isn't it?
That's what I said in the audio.
Okay. And well, let me strike that. Oh. Isn't it true that Sheriff Troyer never denied being threatened by Alzheimer to you?
Correct.
Thank you. Or in your presence?
Correct.
Correct. Thank you. Thanks, officer, and good luck with the new baby.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Officer Barron, to the best of your recollection, Mr. Hobbs, sorry, to the best of your recollection, did Sheriff Troyer tell you that Cedric Alzheimer had threatened to kill him?
Objection, leading, asked and answered.
Sustained as to leading.
Do you have independent recollection of Sheriff Troyer making any statements regarding any threats by Cedric Alzheimer?
Objection, leading, and asked and answered.
Leading, sustained.
Defense counsel is stating, I want to make sure it's clear what is on this audio. What do you hear in the audio with reference to the statement?
Sustained. Asked and answered.
Okay. No other questions?
Nothing
Are we
further.
across?
Thank you, Honor.
Thank you. Let me step down.
Thanks, sir.
We'd like to have him subject to recall if necessary, but we probably won't need it.
Granted.
Thank you.
Your Honor, Officer Parham, Deputy Parham is next, if I could just have a minute to.
Granted.
Who's here?
Parham.
If you need to stand, now would be a good time to do that. The jury is returning to the courtroom. Thank you. Everyone may be seated. The state's next witness.
Thank you, Aaron. We'll call Deputy Parham to the stand.
Is that for you, or is that for me? Is that for me? Oh, thanks, okay. That would be the second one, probably.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, please. State your name and spell your last name.
My name is Patrick Parham, last name spelled Parham.
State.
Sorry, switching out. Thank you, Aaron. Good morning.
Good morning.
Deputy. Deputy Parham, what's your occupation?
I'm a deputy sheriff with Pierce County Sheriff.
And how long have you been doing that?
About 3 years.
Okay. Did you have any prior law enforcement experience before that?
No.
Were you on duty on January 27th, 2021?
Yes.
And what shift were you working?
I was working the graveyard shift, which is 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
And where in Pierce County were you working?
So I was working with the contract city of University Place, which borders Tacoma and Fircrest.
And what do you mean by contract city?
So the city of University Place contracts with Pierce County Sheriff. So I'm employed with Pierce County Sheriff, but I work for the city of University Place
And when you're there,
exclusively.
oh, and when you're there, are you wearing a different uniform or are you just wearing the PCSO?
It's the same Pierce County Sheriff uniform.
Were you working alone that night or did you have a partner?
I had a partner, Deputy Beto.
And was anyone other than you and Deputy, is it Beto? Okay, working at University Place that night?
No, so after midnight, there's only 2 officers for all of University Place. So it's myself and Deputy Beto.
And are the cars the same when you are working, contracting with University Place? Or are they just the PCSO cars?
The cars are re-decaled, so the sides of the car say police instead of sheriff.
Is the Pierce County Sheriff's Office currently wearing body cameras?
Currently, yes, we are wearing body cameras.
And when did that begin? Let me ask you an easier question. On January 27th, 21, was PCSO wearing body cameras yet?
No, ma'am.
I want to talk to you about a 911 call that Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer made on the morning of January 27th, 21. Do you know what incident I'm referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you become aware of that call?
So when this call was broadcasted by dispatch, I was inside the Fircrest police station, which we work very closely with Fircrest, and I believe I was in there with Deputy Beto when this call was broadcasted by our dispatcher.
And what kind of call was it?
Over the radio, it was a broadcast as a priority call. So before any kind of priority call, there's a beeper that goes off to get our attention, to let us know that the following information is going to be important, and to listen in very carefully.
And what information did you have at that initial point in time?
When that call came out, well, an important part of this is the radio in the Fircrest station is a little spotty, so sometimes you don't hear all the information, but it was an officer needed help. That was in Tacoma. That's the information I had.
Did you know at that time who the officer was that needed help?
No.
And did you know why that officer needed help?
There was some type of perceived threat, and the officer was alone.
What did you do when you heard the call?
When I heard the call, Deputy Beto and I decided that we were going to go respond and help the officer. So we got in our patrol cars and responded priority.
Do you recall who was driving?
We were in separate, I'll clarify, we were in separate patrol cars. There's 2 officers for University Place, but we operate in 2 separate cars. So I drove myself.
And you said you responded by, you said you responded priority. What does that mean?
So whenever there's a priority call, I have the discretion on how I respond. So in that instance, it was an officer needed help. They were by themselves. So I responded priority, which, what does that mean? We have lights on, we have sirens on. We may be exceeding the speed limit, but we're clearing intersections. We're being mindful of pedestrians outside, the weather, traffic, time of day. I believe this happened at 2 a.m., so there was little to no traffic on the roads. All that is kept in mind when we're responding priority.
And did you make it to the scene?
Yes.
And did you drive priority the entire time?
No.
Okay, why not?
Maybe a couple blocks out, broadcasted over the radio by a Tacoma officer on scene. They didn't want any more officers to show up and to cancel priority traffic. I was still en route at that time.
Do you know if you got there first or if Deputy Beto got there first?
I don't know.
And what did you see when you arrived?
When I arrived, there was a sedan parked in the middle of the road with Tacoma officers around the car.
Okay. What else did you see?
That's what I saw when I arrived.
Okay. Did you see a second vehicle at any point?
No.
After you arrived on scene, did you learn who the officer was that was calling for help?
Yes, so maybe 5 to 10 minutes after being on scene. And again, my role when I showed up, because this is not my jurisdiction, I'm not investigating the crime. I was more scene security, so I'm in the background. So with the conversation with the Tacoma officers and Mr. Altimer, either sheriff, I don't know if it was mentioned by name, I somehow put it together, there was a sheriff on scene. That was the officer that needed help, a sheriff.
When you say a sheriff, is there more than one sheriff?
I didn't know if it was an outside jurisdiction sheriff, but at some point during the call, I looked down the street and I identified that is Sheriff Troyer.
And that's your sheriff, correct?
Correct.
Had you ever talked to Sheriff Troyer prior to this incident?
No.
What other Pierce County Sheriff's Office deputies, did you see on scene that night?
Deputy Beto, my partner, and then later on, Sergeant Youngman.
Anyone else?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. So what did you do when you arrived?
When I arrived, I was in the background, scene security, just keeping eyes. I didn't ask any questions. I was just simply there observing.
And what did you do when you realized that Sheriff Troyer was there?
When I realized it was Sheriff Troyer, I saw multiple Tacoma officers walking over to Sheriff Troyer and walking back. At some point, Deputy Beto and I walked over to Sheriff Troyer to speak with him.
And why did you do that?
He was standing by himself at that time.
What did you talk about?
I introduced myself. I'd never met Sheriff Troy before. I talked about how I like working in the university place. I just got married. We were just making casual small talk.
Do you remember what Deputy Beto talked about?
I don't recall.
Did you ask Sheriff Troyer what happened?
No, I didn't ask any investigative questions to anyone.
And why is that?
It was not my role.
Did Sheriff Troyer volunteer any information about what had happened?
Not that I can recall.
About how long did you and Deputy Beto talk to Sheriff Troyer?
Maybe 15 minutes.
Did Sheriff Troyer appear afraid or concerned for his safety?
No.
When did you decide to leave the scene that night?
When Sergeant Youngman showed up.
And why did Sergeant Youngman's presence cause you to leave the scene?
Well, there's other factors as well. There's no one covering University Place, and someone in my chain of command, a sergeant, showed up to the scene, so I left.
And where did you go after you left?
To University Place.
That's all I have. Thank you. We'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination. Mr. Gross.
Thank you. Deputy, first of all, on behalf of Sheriff Troyer, thank you for being here today. I just want to make sure I understand your testimony correctly. You showed up on scene after the call was canceled. You did no investigation. You talked to no one about the incident. You had a personal conversation with Sheriff Troyer, and then you left.
Yes, sir.
All right, no further questions.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Oh, is this officer, is this deputy excused?
Yes. Defense?
No objection.
You are excused from this case.
Your Honor, that's the state's last witness for this morning. We thought 4 would cover it, but apparently not.
All right. Members of the jury, at this time you're going to get
We could start lunch earlier.
good. One.
After lunch.
That will depend upon when the lunch is delivered for the jury, so we're checking on that right now.
Oh, right. I just wanted to be flexible, but
Sure.
I totally get it, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it depends on. Yeah, it's like I'm not gonna mess up with that.
I assume lunch was ordered.
You're on.
Good. Yes.
Are you sure he's here? Oh, lunch is here.
Turner's lunch is here.
They're here already.